I really don't care what happens to her at all. I don't care. Like everybody they tiptoe around with this social media, but what y'all don't get is that it be real consequence for y'all little flexes, y'all quick flexes for $300 that you need. It be consequence.
The courtroom was already wrapped in silence long before the proceedings began. It wasn't the ordinary stillness of a legal setting. It was heavier, denser, like the air itself knew that something unforgettable was about to unfold. Every person seated inside carried that awareness, their bodies tense, eyes fixed forward, waiting for the inevitable storm. On one side of the room sat Teyana Taylor, her face outwardly calm, composed, but her eyes betrayed her. Behind the steady gaze sat a storm she couldn't hide, a chaos only she knew. Across from her sat Iman Shumpert, his frame stiff, his jaw set with determination, his posture fighting to display strength. But his body language betrayed him too. The weight of the day pressed visibly on his chest, threatening to crack the image of control. No cameras were allowed inside, but that never stopped the world from watching. Every whisper, every leak, every stray sentence that left this courtroom was destined to ignite into wildfire outside. And this wasn't just any custody battle. It was Teyana and Iman. Two people once celebrated for their love, their unity, their image as the perfect couple, now torn apart in the most public, painful way possible. Their relationship had once been goals, plastered across timelines and headlines, but now every headline spelled disaster. For weeks leading up to this day, tension simmered and grew. Their marriage had collapsed in real time for the world to witness. Pictures that once showed joy now looked like relics of a broken promise. Behind the carefully crafted social media statements, behind the public smiles and neat explanations, there was chaos. Messy, raw chaos. Both wanted custody. Both declared they were acting in the best interests of their children. Both dug in, refusing to yield because neither could bear the thought of losing. The court had already seen its fair share of fireworks. Arguments delivered with sharp precision, thick stacks of legal filings, carefully scripted pleas by lawyers. Each side had played its moves like a game of chess, waiting to corner the other. But no one in that room expected what would shift the entire case. It wasn't the lawyers. It wasn't expert witnesses. It wasn't even Teyana or Iman themselves. The turn came from someone smaller, someone who should never have been forced into such a space. Their daughter. When the judge called her name, everything froze. The crack of the gavel echoed against the walls, but it wasn't just a sound, it was a signal that everything was about to change. The room transformed in that instant, the sterile legal procedure dissolving into something unforgettable. Conversations halted. People shifted in their seats, hearts racing. Even the court reporters paused, fingers hovering above their keyboards, stunned into stillness. Teyana's eyes widened slightly, just enough to betray the truth. She knew what this meant. She knew what was coming. Her heart pounded inside her chest, though she kept her face as unreadable as she could manage. On the other side, Iman lowered his head, bracing himself like a man who knew a storm was on the horizon but had no umbrella to protect himself. Their daughter walked toward the stand with quiet determination. She was young, far too young to be standing there, yet old enough in the court's eyes to speak for herself. Each step she took seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. The innocence of her small frame contrasted with the gravity of her task, and the entire room gasped when they realized this moment was real. Many could hardly believe the judge would call a child to testify. But the truth of custody battles this fierce is brutal. Sometimes the only voice that matters is the child's. And in that moment, her voice carried more weight than all the hours of legal back and forth combined. She climbed into the oversized chair, her feet dangling inches from the ground. The microphone was tilted down toward her small frame. The judge spoke gently, almost tenderly, reminding her she didn't need to perform or exaggerate. She only needed to be honest. Nothing more, nothing less. She nodded, nervous, eyes darting, but her expression showed she understood. She knew the gravity of the moment, maybe not in legal terms but in her heart. And then she began. The room leaned in as one body. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a whisper broke through. She didn't lash out, didn't accuse, didn't dramatize. She simply spoke with the kind of raw truth only a child could possess. Her words cut deeper than any legal accusation could. She talked about her mother, the comfort, the love, the moments of laughter. She talked about her father, his strength, his presence, the memories they shared. She didn't choose sides because in her heart there were no sides. There was only family. She spoke of their home, the laughter that once filled it, the fights that broke through, the silences that lingered after love soured into argument. She shared small details no adult had considered worth mentioning. Tiny truths only a child notices, truths that stripped away the polished facade of social media perfection. Those details pulled back the curtain, exposing the reality of what it feels like to grow up in the middle of fractured love. Her words were pure, unfiltered, unrehearsed. And because of that, they became powerful beyond measure. There was no agenda. There was no strategy. Just honesty. Honesty from a child who wanted her world to stop breaking apart. Across the room, Iman tried to stay strong. At first, he sat stiff, his hands gripping his knees, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the floor. But as her words sank deeper, as her truths piled one after another, the cracks in his armor appeared. His eyes filled. His breathing grew ragged. And then the dam broke. Tears streamed down his face. His broad shoulders shook. The man who had faced thousands under bright lights, who had thrived under pressure in arenas, who had built a career on discipline and composure, now crumbled in the quiet honesty of his own daughter's voice. He wasn't an athlete. He wasn't a celebrity. He was just a father, stripped down, undone, destroyed by truth. The courtroom's silence deepened. This was no longer a silence of suspense. This was the silence of heartbreak, of respect, of empathy. Even the judge's face softened, visibly moved. Teyana sat frozen. Her face didn't show tears, but her lips trembled, and her hands pressed together tightly, almost as if she were praying. Her eyes never left her daughter. Every word spoken felt like both love and knife. She wanted to leap forward, to hold her, to whisper that she didn't need to carry this burden, but she couldn't. She had to sit still, had to listen, had to let her child's truth pour into the room. The little girl's voice cracked at times, but she never stopped. She said she wanted peace. She said she wanted both parents. She said she didn't want to choose. In those words, the case transformed. It wasn't about legal rights anymore. It was about healing. It was about scars invisible to adults but carved into the heart of a child. When she finished, the air was thick with emotion. Not a dry eye remained. Reporters who had come chasing scandal and drama sat stunned, their notes forgotten. Lawyers who had prepared endless strategies found themselves humbled into silence. Even the bailiff, stoic by duty, looked shaken as he gently guided her out of the stand. The sound of her footsteps leaving the room echoed louder than any cross-examination ever had. Iman buried his face in his hands, shoulders trembling, unable to contain the torrent of grief and love tearing him apart. He didn't care who was watching. Teyana closed her eyes, her face unreadable to some, strong to others, but inside she knew those words would never leave her. They would haunt her forever. They were a mirror of everything she feared. Everything she had lost, everything she still longed to repair. Outside, the world reacted instantly. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Social media erupted. Fans praised the daughter's bravery, calling her the only voice of reason in a mess created by adults. Others criticized the parents, questioning how it had ever come to this point, whether a child should have been placed in such a cruel position. Memes spread, threads debated, timelines filled with hot takes, even though no cameras had captured a second of what truly happened. Inside that cold courtroom, though, reality had unfolded in a way no one could deny. For weeks, lawyers had dueled, armed with files, evidence, expert testimony, but none of it compared to the trembling words of one child. Sitting in a chair far too big for her, feet swinging above the ground, she had spoken a truth no adult dared to say aloud. She didn't care about custody laws, didn't understand parental rights or legal jargon. What she knew was her world. Bedtime stories that stopped too soon, birthdays that didn't feel like birthdays, smiles that disappeared, pretending to sleep to avoid hearing arguments. Simple words but real. Words that pierced every heart in the room like glass shattering. Now the weight fell on the judge. The decision ahead wasn't just about custody schedules or visitation rights. It was about shaping the emotional world of a little girl who had just laid her truth bare. Would her testimony tilt the balance? Would it be the deciding factor that lawyers had fought endlessly to control? Or would it deepen the rift, ensuring reconciliation would never come? The case wasn't finished. There were still motions, closing arguments, boxes left to check. But something had shifted forever. The courtroom had been reminded of the core truth. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about a childhood. And sometimes the most powerful voices aren't the loudest. They don't come from legal arguments or polished statements. They come from trembling lips, from tear-filled eyes, from innocence forced into wisdom too soon. Sometimes the raw honesty of a child can bring the strongest adults to their knees. And in that moment, amid the wreckage of love, promises, and pride, a little girl had reminded everyone what was truly at stake.